Yeah, I was kind of tempted to go down to the State Department today and just shout out, "Do white lives matter?" You know, because obviously you don't care about the lives of brown people who are from there, but I mean, these apparently an American citizen was killed. Let's look at the response of U.S. Israeli reciprocal spokesman John Kirby, who speaks for the Biden administration, to this massacre. Here's the question.
Any conditions? Yes, they have a right.
We're not sending aid.
So how can the U.S. continue to send aid to Israel without any conditions? Yes, they have a right.
We're not sending aid to Israel. We're sending aid into Gaza, and that's
how can the U.S. continue to send military aid
military
to Israel without any conditions? Is there no red line that can be placed?
You know, we've had this discussion, you and me, quite a bit from up here. They're still under a viable threat of Hamas. We're still going to make sure that they can defend themselves, and the 7th of October doesn't happen again. That doesn't mean that it's a free pass, that we look the other way when something like this happens, or that we aren't and haven't since the beginning of the conflict urged the Israelis to be more precise, to be more careful, and quite frankly, to increase the amount of humanitarian assistance that gets in. You know, I haven't been asked about it yet, but I expected I would be. You know, there was a discussion just yesterday with our Israeli counterparts about Rafah. Now, this one was done virtually. We expect it'll be an in-person meeting here in a week's time or so. But the whole reason to have that meeting was to talk about our concerns over a major ground operation in Rafah and to present viable alternatives for them to be more precise and more targeted. So the idea that we're some plastic graveyard here and we're not paying attention to the civilian casualties or the civilian suffering is just not true.
Right, but these are verbal urgings, verbal commitments. There's no other incentive besides the urging.
I know you want us to hang some sort of condition over their neck, and what I'm telling you is that we continue to work with the Israelis to make sure that they are as precise as they can be, and that more aid's getting in, and we're going to continue to take that approach.
Well, they were pretty precise, weren't they? I mean, they actually hit the logo.
Exactly.
They hit all 3 cars. So we're not going to hang any condition over Israel's neck.
Yeah, and
we don't have any leverage.
Yeah, that's an honest expression of policy. They're not going to do a single thing. They're going to keep having meetings on Zoom. That's what they're going to keep doing, and maybe in person, either in person or in Zoom. They're going to have the same meetings where they plot on how to destroy the people of Gaza, make their homes, make their home uninhabitable, so that they have nothing to live in once this thing finally ends, whenever the U.S. finally says that they've had enough. But and look, they've been having these meetings from the start. Before Israel launched its all-out assault on Gaza, they were having meetings. I mean, what did that accomplish from the point of view of John Kirby here? I mean, all it looks like is the U.S. is an accomplice to Israel, because meanwhile, what's been happening, and we've just gotten more word of this. Last week, there was a report in the Washington Post that Biden sent off quietly more bombs to Israel, including those 2,000 bombs that initially Biden administration officials were saying they were no longer going to send. Remember that this was early November, where when Israel was under just global criticism for dropping these massive U.S. supplied bombs on densely populated areas of Gaza. So they came out with this talking point, which they fed, of course, to the New York Times, that they were going to give Israel smaller bombs. This is from early November. The measures include using smaller bombs against Hamas, U.S. officials said. I mean, first of all, that's a joke on its face, even if it's true, because the bombs are not being dropped on Hamas. They're being dropped on densely populated areas. But also, they didn't even send these smaller bombs. They're still sending the exact same 2,000-pound bombs they were sending from the start. And that was newly confirmed last week by the Washington Post.
Well, they hit the aid convoy with smaller bombs. Those were Hellfires.
There you go. Yeah.
Those Hellfires might be familiar to a lot of Israeli attendees of the Nova Electronic Music Festival who are trying to get away. That's what they use to kill people who are getting away. I guess they use those are the bombs they use on white people. I don't know what it is, but the smaller bombs are killing people, and they're sending tons of 2,000-pound bombs. Let's listen to State Department spokesman Matthew Miller Team Gargamel. We have some buffering to do here. Let me reset this. It's a long exchange, and I wanted to get to the relevant part. So I got it now. Matthew Miller's been up there day after day after day, just defending everything that Israel does. I don't know how you can psychologically withstand that unless you are just a venal sociopath. But here he is.
Law. At the same time, we are committed to Israel's right to self-defense. And this
Sorry,
is
we
a
didn't add the
long-term
trap
commitment the
music.
United States has made, that it made before October 7th, and that continues it continues since October 7th. So obviously the fight in Gaza is connected to Israel's long-term security in very substantial ways. I got into some of that with response to Matt's question. But Israel still faces, in addition to the security challenge posed in Gaza, it still faces an Iran that is hostile to Israel. It still faces Hezbollah on its northern border that is hostile.
This is why they need 2,000-pound bombs. This is the question.
And so we are going to continue to support Israel's ability to defend itself against those sworn enemies that want to see it end as a modern state or a state at all.
Just to follow up, the 2,000-pound bomb is self-defense.
A 2,000-pound bomb is self-defense.
So they need to have the ability to defend themselves against a very well-armed adversary. Like I said, Iran, Hezbollah, which has thousands and thousands of fighters and quite sophisticated material and quite sophisticated weaponry, as we've seen them deploy, against Israel in the last few days. So yes, they do need the modern military equipment to defend themselves against those adversaries.
Gaza, before the beginning of Gaza.
And we have made clear to them that
The reporter points out they used him in Gaza.
Whatever weapon they use in Gaza, be it a bomb, be it a tank round, be it anything, that we expect them to use those weapons in full compliance with international humanitarian law.
Unbelievable. So they're still defending, sending bombs that, seriously, I cannot think of any military right now that has or is using 2,000-pound bombs in urban warfare settings. I can't think of it. I mean, I guess you could point to the U.S. in Mosul and Raqqa to some extent, but we've never seen in military history, modern military history, post-World War II history, the use of 2,000-pound bombs. So this is another kind of like legal red line that Israel is violating to create new space for countries like the US to do the same. This is one of Israel's key exports, is criminality, the normalization of criminality. And here you have the State Department defending that. And there's one more disgusting clip I want to play. John Kirby, US Israeli reciprocal spokesman John Kirby. This was today. Also on sending 2,000-pound bombs. I don't think we ever, even under the Bush administration, I don't think we saw this amount of just advocacy for war crimes, like at this scale with this level of shamelessness. But this is definitely Rumsfeldian.
Right.
Well, on the point of conditions, the president on February 8th issued a memo, and it said, and you already know this, but just for context, it said that it was the policy of this administration to prevent arms transfers that risk facilitating or otherwise contributing to violations of human rights or international humanitarian law. Is firing a missile at people delivering food and killing them not a violation of international humanitarian law?
Well, the Israelis have already admitted that this was a mistake that they made. They're doing an investigation. They'll get to the bottom of this. Let's not get ahead of that. Your question presumes at this very early hour that it was a deliberate strike, that they knew exactly what they were hitting, that they were hitting aid workers and did it on purpose. And there's no evidence of that. I would also remind you, sir,
this is amazing.
that we continue to look at incidents as they occur. The State Department has a process in place. And to date, as you and I are speaking, they have not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international humanitarian law. Unless you think we don't take it seriously, I can assure you that we do. We look at this in
I
real
don't
time.
think you
They
do.
have never violated international humanitarian law ever in the past 5 to 6 months.
I'm telling you, the State Department has looked at incidents in the past and has yet to determine that any of those incidents violate international humanitarian law.
Right, Nadia. Thank you, Cody.
Right.
Oh my God.
Never has Israel violated international law in the last 5 months, according to John Kirby, with just total confidence. He's speaking condescendingly to the reporter. I assure you, sir. He's like one of those guys in line when you at the airport, like, sir. I mean, it's amazing. Do you actually think that we don't take international law seriously? Our lawyers affirm this. They are not soft-handed, pencil-neck little Eichmanns providing legal support for an illegal genocide. I mean, it's amazing. Like you can see the press is just completely turned on them.
At a certain point, I think the press corps, I mean, if they cared about mass murder, they would boycott these sessions. Like, why should they dignify John Kirby with their presence?
Yeah. What if they all stood up and turned their backs?
Yeah. Like, why does he deserve the right to be able to sit there and just lie through his teeth and support this genocidal regime with such condescension too? They should, I mean, they won't, because of course, if you're there in that room, then you're there for access and you identify with people like John Kirby. I mean, not everybody, obviously, but many people. But if they had dignity, I think that they would do that. It's such a sick display, and he seems to enjoy it along with Matt Miller. It's worth psychologically analyzing one day. Like, what prompts a person to take such pleasure in being so evil and such a malicious liar?
I can tell you, you have the two spokesmen at the State Department, Vedant Patel, and you got John Kirby. And Kirby's further ahead than them, but he used to be the State Department spokesman under Obama with Jen Psaki. And Jen Psaki's living the dream. She is the top propagandist on the outside for the White House at MSNBC. She's kind of like a celebrity. And she was like a loser when we would just laugh at her when she was at the State Department, because she would fumble constantly. John Kirby would lose his temper all the time. I remember Gayan Chikian, the RT reporter, he completely lost it on her and told her to go back to Russia or something. And Matt Lee had to get John Kirby back in line. So these are very mediocre people. Vedant Patel, I remember at one briefing, he's a former spokesman for Pramila Jayapal, comms director for Pramila Jayapal. So he comes out of the office of a progressive member of Congress. Yeah. He's Indian American, and he made a joke at one briefing that his parents were disappointed that he didn't become a doctor. So basically, he's taking a rebellious route as the son of immigrants, and he hopes that he can become like a top diplomat, maybe a counselor to a top U.S. ambassador in a conflict zone, and show his parents that he was actually on the right path in life. And if it means defending genocide whenever Matt Miller's not in the room, then he'll just have to do that for his family. Then you got Matthew Miller, who looks kind of just like Gargamel in his youth, it just feels like that, like he's completely soulless. He's the former comms director for Robert Menendez, who historically has been one of the top 5 recipients of AIPAC aid and has been jailed, or has gone his way to jail maybe after taking gold bars, literal gold bars, like a cartoon pimp from an Egyptian lobbyist. He already was on corruption trial once. His defense was paid for by AIPAC donors. So that Matthew Miller then ran a crisis communications firm when Trump was in office. And I think he's gonna cycle back through the revolving door and make tons of money telling his high-level clients that he handled crisis communications for the biggest crisis an administration has faced in years. And he's just going to make tons of money and move to a mansion in Potomac, Maryland. That's what he wants. And now Kirby has his own team. He's been moved up from the Pentagon to like the main man defending the White House. He's kind of more important than what's her name? Karine Jean-Pierre, who
has a background, who's Haitian American and has a background actually working in Haitian solidarity. I think she even worked once briefly with Kim Ives of Haiti Liberté.
She did, she did.
But look at her now. I mean, now she's up there every day, whitewashing the Israeli genocide and making fun basically of activists, making light of activists who challenged Joe Biden about this, and dismissing the concerns of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. That's her life now.
Yeah, and imagine her life working, if she was working at Haiti Liberté's office in East New York. I mean, I've been there. She's part of the Beltway elite. She is with Julianne Malveaux, who's a famous correspondent. She's also kind of come up from nothing, replacing Jen Psaki, and is not as talented as Jen Psaki, which isn't saying much. And now she's just famous. I mean, so these people are choosing celebrity and fame over opposition to genocide. I know people working at lower levels throughout the Biden administration who feel the same way. It's like, why would they give up, if they're at the DOJ, the possibility of leveraging those connections that you get in the DOJ into a multi-million-dollar job at a law firm where you're going to help corporate clients get off light, and you are going to live in a mansion too, and you have kids, you have maybe a young kid. Hey, you want the best for them. Who cares about all those kids getting slaughtered in Gaza? If you quit, what are you going to do? Work under Matt Dust somewhere? Like, what are you going to do? So it's stark. And these people are motivated by careerist ambitions completely. They are just like clawing their way to the top with not a lot of talent. I got to say, I think John Kirby's the most talented because he's the most just confident liar. No one believes him.
What's amazing about Karine Jean-Pierre is she can't look up when she's talking.
Yeah.
It's like she knows that everything she's saying is a lie, and she feels some shame about it. So she just does not look up, which is amazing for a White House press secretary to do. I mean, if you're going to have that job, you have to be a committed liar, and she's not. She can't look people in the eye. So it's awkward. When she's up there, it's awkward because you can see just in her body language how strained everything is, to the point where she can't make eye contact with the people she's lying to.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I would love to see some body language expert analyze her and the other mouthpieces of genocide. These other kind of like Goebbels, how do you say it? Goebbelsian figures. It's a tough one.
That is
as a non-German speaker.
Do you want to hear more from John Kirby about this, or should we move on? Because I have one more clip.
It's Kirby time.
You described the strike as a possible mistake by Israel. According to Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, it wasn't one strike, but three. The first one, then an interval during which aid workers got out of their vehicles, removed the wounded, tried to move to another vehicle, which
was that Andrew Feinberg?
And then a third strike, as they tried to move and escape in a third.
That is Andrew Feinberg, but I forgot who he is. He was
like
Russiagate, right?
He was the plant inside Sputnik who tried to become a Russiagate figure and never rose to the level. He tried to be like an FBI asset inside Sputnik, and he didn't make the cut.
Right, I remember that he tried. This is during the peak of Russiagate.
Yeah,
and he tried to cash in as like a Sputnik, denouncing his former colleagues, and
and he was like, this guy put his feet up on the table in the lunch break room, and he's Russian.
Well, he's obviously been rewarded with some kind of job that puts him in the White House briefing room, which is where he belongs. And so Russiagate does always pay. Russiagate grifting does always pay.
So it's interesting to look at all these different characters. So Andrew Feinberg just does whatever he thinks the press is supposed to do, because he's the loser kid who kind of eats his boogers in the corner and wants everyone to kind of accept him. So he's actually turning on John Kirby because everybody is.
All right, let's hear his actual
tape.
Vehicle, at which point all of them were dead. How would the second and third strikes of these marked vehicles be a mistake? And why would the U.S. not more forcefully set conditions on the use of U.S.-made weaponry when it is being used to target aid workers? If the first one was a mistake, the second two were targeted with the intent of killing everyone in that convoy. So how do you respond to that?
First of all, there's an investigation going on. So why don't we let it get done? And why don't we see what they find in terms of the decision-making process that led to this terrible outcome? Prime Minister and the IDF have noted that it was their error. If you don't like the word mistake, their error. They're investigating it. Let them do that work and let them see what they come up with, and then we'll go from there.
And, sorry, one more, John. 2 years ago, the IDF killed an Al Jazeera journalist. They said that that was a mistake, that she was wearing a marked press vest. She was shot anyway.
They investigated it, and they released the findings of their investigation, which found that they were at fault. Go on.
But my question, sir, is in that case, the Israelis did not initiate any criminal proceeding. In this case, if it's found that the marked convoy was deliberately targeted, if not with the first shot, but the second 2 shots, would the U.S. support criminal penalties?
As I said, we would expect that should there be a need for accountability, that accountability be properly put in place for whoever may be responsible for this. But again, a lot of that's going to depend on the investigation.
Remember when Biden said, "If you harm an American, we're going to come for you," or something like that? Well, then look at this. Compare that to this blasé response to Israel killing an American aid worker along with other internationals delivering food in Gaza. It's we'll see what happens. We'll,
and who's doing the investigation?
Yeah,
Blinken has called for Israel to investigate itself again.
Yeah,
it's like like, hello, Mr. Dahmer, Jeffrey. Yes. He cracks open the door. It's Milwaukee PD. There have been a report of some unusual smells in your apartment. Can you go inside and check it out for us and let us know if everything's okay? Yeah, sure. Okay. And then Jeffrey Dahmer comes back out like, yeah, everything's fine in here. I don't see any rotting corpses or anything. So you guys can go. All right. Sure. Proceed. Oh, by the way, do you guys want like a chocolate bunny I made down at the factory? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dahmer. Like, that's what we're dealing with the U.S. and Israel investigating itself, like the world's greatest criminal mafia investigating itself. And that is for the employees of someone who is like hosted Tony Blinken on his podcast, hung out with Tony Blinken, shilled for the Democrats, put himself out there as the greatest ally of USAID in Ukraine, Jose Andres, an official ambassador, culinary ambassador of the State Department. That's what he gets, is the criminals get to investigate themselves. It's such an insult to Jose Andres, and it really shows a lack of dignity on his part to not just turn the table over on Tony Blinken. Just like yank off the tablecloth, throw all your little tapas creations and rub them in Tony Blinken's face, but you have no pride.
This whole deference to an Israeli investigation, it brings up, or for me, it evokes this famous headline from the New York Times. CIA says it has found no link between itself and crack trade.